Hey everybody, welcome back to the vlog. So today is something a little bit special. Now, in the past, I've talked to you guys about mirrorless and how I'm a proponent of mirrorless ever since I saw the first Sony A7. I just love mirrorless, and especially full frame mirrorless. Well, today we're going to talk to somebody that has converted from Canon over to Sony and Sony mirrorless full frame. And it's been about 2 years for him. So I want to get to know how, he feels about it. What is, his thoughts on it. So before I go ranting on and on, like I always do, guys, I'm going to bring Jim Denham on board. So how you doing, Jim?
I'm doing great, Joseph. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. Welcome to the channel.
Man, it's good to be here. I've really enjoyed commenting and joining in on the discussion, but it's really unique and special to actually be on it. So this is cool.
Well, welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. So if you guys don't know, Jim Denham is an amazing landscape photographer. He's been doing this for many, many years. His work is just absolutely beautiful. And during the discussion that we have, what I want to do, if it's okay with you, I'm going to have some of your spark that you shared with me, and it has a lot of just incredible pictures, guys, and I'll be rolling those kind of as we talk. So anyways, Jim, who are you? So what do you do? What do you shoot?
I'm as you said, a landscape photographer. I shoot mainly in West Tennessee, but I do some traveling. I've been taking pictures seriously now since about 2009. I'm married, got a kid. The kid is my muse. He's what got me started into photography.
Nice.
And I've got started into HDR, was my first love, but then graduated now to where a lot of my stuff is long exposures, more dreamy like landscape pictures. But I love all the photography. And as you said, about 2 years ago, I was shooting with a Canon system. Not because I thought Canon was better than everything. It's just that I actually got the entry-level DSLR about $100 cheaper than the Nikon.
There you go.
But I did make the switch 2 years ago to Sony, and that's where we are today.
It's kind of cool how that switch happened, right? Because it was a camera that you ended up just haphazardly winning, right?
That's right. I don't know about the rest of the guys who watch the vlog here, but I tend to enter just about anything that comes through from like podcasts and different web pages that have win a free Canon, win a free Nikon, your choice. And I enter all of them, never thinking I'll ever win any of them. But right. I happened to enter a contest through Scotty Vest and GoGo Internet, where they said Guy Kawasaki, I'm not sure if everybody knows who he is, but it's basically win everything in Guy's Scotty Vest. And I had forgotten I even entered it until they sent me an email saying I'd won. And so I went back and checked, and lo and behold, it was a ridiculous prize package. It was one of those where they had to pinch me several times to get it. I just didn't expect it, but one of the actual main thing in it was a Sony A7 II full frame mirrorless camera. Wow. There was a couple other things in there, iPad Pro, iPhones, stuff like that. But yeah, that's how I come about it. I wasn't looking for a new camera. It just happened to fall in my lap, which was wonderful. Right.
You can't beat that. So as a landscape photographer, I'm sure you're using a lot of wide angle lenses. Are you using Sony glass or are you using third-party glass? What are you using?
Well, when I was a Canon shooter, I had a Canon 60D, and I used third-party glass. I was using a Sigma 70-200 and a Tamron 16-55. But when I switched to Sony, there was so much in getting the adapters and things like that, and the adapters wouldn't work with my third-party glass. So what I did was just up and get rid of all my equipment and bought Sony native glass. And I started with the 16-35 f4 with the Zeiss glass in it, and then eventually got the 90mm f2.8 macro. And those are my two main lenses. I've since added a 50mm 1.8, But other than that, those are the two main ones, with the 16 to 35 being my go-to, being a landscape photographer.
Nice. And as far as the landscape, you're saying you're doing a lot of long exposures. Now, one of the things that a lot of people have talked about and commented over the many videos I've done about the Sony system is about this banding issue and low light kind of issue. How does that work with the system that you have? Is that the case? I mean, I want to get actual real world, from you. Like, how is it? And if you are getting banding of any kind, is it easy to get rid of? What does it look like? So on and so forth.
Well, the only time I've really noticed banding is when you're underexposed in low light, really long exposures, and when you try to bring that back up, sometimes it does show up. The other thing that you do see, and I didn't put this in the Spark page, I should have, when you do really long exposures, when your shutter's opened up a lot, the Sony sensors have a tendency to drop some pixels. You'll see an occasional pixel that'll come off of there. The banding I haven't had to clean up too much. I just have to be careful how far I go with pushing it, and getting the image exposed properly helps.
Right.
But the dead pixels, or hot pixels, I guess.
Yeah,
is really
hot
what it
pixels.
Is. I figured out a way to get around that, and one of the ways to get around that is by using a Sony app called the Smooth Reflections app. It'll actually take however many pictures you want to set up at a regular shutter speed. Instead of going 2 minutes on your shutter, you may set up to take 48 pictures at 1/5 of a second. And then it'll blend all those together, and you don't have the noise, and you don't have the hot pixels in there, and you still get the benefits of a long exposure. So there's some little benefits for those applications there that you can put on the Sonys that I didn't have access to with the Canon.
Yeah, I heard also some of the software that actually removes some of those hot pixels, they also remove stars. So if you're doing like astrophotography or something, you're like, hey, where's all my stars? So, but yeah, I mean, there's always a method of getting around stuff. And I think every camera system has the goods and the bads and everything in between. And anything that's on the bad side, you just figure out a way around it. And you just move forward. A lot of times it's less the camera, and it's usually pilot error anyways, and like you said, exposing properly, right, you don't end up having as much of an issue anyways. So, but as far as the system itself, as far as the camera in your hand, how does that feel compared to you using the Canon system?
Well, that is a really good question, and something that I was really worried about when I was reading about the camera before I had actually got it in my hands. Because it is I had a 60D with a battery grip on it, and I was used to that bulk, even though it wasn't as big as some of the, like the 1DX or anything like that. It was still pretty hefty. Right. And I was used to that, and I was worried that the camera would be too small and would feel uncomfortable. But what I found is especially I put a L bracket on the camera for my tripod, and honestly, it feels wonderful in the hand. I was really surprised where the shutter button is, and how comfortable my hand sits. The thumb sits. It's got a little pocket right there where the thumb sits right in it. When I do hand hold it, I don't have any trouble with it. It was actually quite comfortable, but even more so, it's really light compared to what I had, especially in the bag when you're talking about the whole gear that was coming with, because the 70 to 200 was large and bulky. So now I can carry this stuff around my neck, hold it in my hand or on the tripod without having too much wear. So it's really good. Surprisingly good. I was really nervous about it.
Yeah. And also a lot of questions I get is about the menuing system. Some people like it, some people don't. It is a complete different animal, right, to the Canon.
Oh my gosh.
Menu.
Absolutely.
What do you think? I guess what's your reaction to the menu?
I'm not that crazy about the menu system, mainly because it's kind of vast, and it's really hard to find, especially initially when you first start with it, finding what you're looking for. And like right now on we've got the A6300 that I'm taping this on, or filming it on. Finding some of those menu items is not very easy because there are so many menu items in there, and they kind of layer them in. So it is hard with the stuff that I normally use, like the commands that I normally use, I've pretty much figured it out and gotten to where I know where those are. But, you know, if I have to do something different, it is pretty complicated as far as finding out where everything is.
Yeah, I know. I did a review of, I think it was the A7 R2 and the A7 S2 simultaneously, and that was one of the things that kind of bothered me, because coming from a Canon, you know, shooter for 20 years, I was like, oh my goodness, there is a lot of stuff I mean, it's packed. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do. I think the customization is really great with the Sony camera. You can just customize it and make it exactly what you want it to do, or how you want the menus to be, or even the buttons. You know, customize everything. So sometimes that gets to be a little overwhelming for some people coming into the Sony side. But another thing that I hear a lot is EVF. You know, you have the proponents of just looking down the barrels, you know, through a prism, seeing what you see in comparison to looking at basically a monitor, you know, a high-res version of what you're getting. What are your thoughts on it? Does it help you with landscape? Does it make you crazy? Do you absolutely love it? What do you think?
I absolutely love it. And this was a surprise for me. I didn't know what to think about it because I had never used one before, had never used it. Right. But the one thing I find myself doing, there's two things about it that are really nice. One, because it is electronic and it's seeing what your sensor sees, you're seeing the image through the viewfinder and on the screen on the back, the LCD on the back. So what you're looking at is the actual picture. Of course, when you're doing long exposures, not exactly, but the exposure that you have is there. So that's one really good thing. The other thing is reviewing pictures. You know, if you're doing landscape, a lot of times I like to look at the LCD, especially on the Canon system. I was a live view shooter, but if you got bright sun, it's hard to see it, and so it was a little bit difficult. With this thing, it's really good because you can look through the viewfinder, you can block out the sun, you can see it both before you take the picture and after you take the picture. It's kind of funny. I'll be sitting here looking through my camera, and people will be thinking I'm taking pictures, but what I'm doing is reviewing pictures, so they stop and worry about it. But it's fantastic. I have had no problems at all with the EVF. I like it a lot better, actually.
So it's kind of the idea of what you see is what you get, right? That's it.
Absolutely.
It's WYSIWYG.
Yep, WYSIWYG. It's exactly right. What you see in that camera is what you're going to get on the frame.
Yeah, so really, you know, talking about the EVF, and I'm going to guess it would definitely deplete the battery quicker having the EVF there. How is the battery life on the camera that you currently have? So you're burning through them like chiclets, right? You just keep popping.
Well, yeah, that was the first thing that I had to do, and because I could be out shooting, and I'll just give you an instance. Normally, when I go out shooting, I'm there from like 5:30 in the morning until maybe 7:30, 8 o'clock. So I'm only there for a few hours. I will burn through at least one battery, sometimes two in that time frame.
Wow.
And I mean, it just goes away quickly. A lot of it because I'm doing live, you know, looking at everything constantly. It's on all the time. I've got live view, and it's got the long exposure, so the shutter's open a long time on top of it. So I've got 5 batteries for each camera, and I keep them all the time, and I keep them charged all the time because it's just if there's one thing that's bad, or I'd say that's been disappointing, I guess is more like it, is with the battery life. It's just not good. Fortunately, on the new grades, like the A9 and the A7R3, they've come out with the newer, longer-lasting battery, but I can't adapt that to what I have. So it's nice that the new technology's there, but I'm not going to get to take advantage of it unless I swap up at some point.
Yeah, so you're just going to have to wait until you upgrade. You know, I'll get to that. Yeah. I'll get to that later. So as far as
I'll wait till I win an A9.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's right. So as far as the lenses go, you're not really adapting any old glass. So when you converted 2 years ago from Canon to Sony, it was pretty much that was it. You didn't come back. That was you went all Sony, and that was kind of like end of story. So one of the things that I'm really interested in, of course, you know, I'm the autofocus guy. I just, sharpness is just crazy for me. That's why I invented the focus pyramid and all that stuff for autofocus lens calibration. The thing that I hear a lot too is that tracking is pretty good, not as good as the dual pixel, obviously, of Canon. How does it work out for you? Do you do a lot of live stuff? Do you do a lot of video or only photo? How is that tracking?
I don't do a lot of action stuff. I don't do a lot of movement. I do take a lot of pictures of my kid.
Right.
And most of the time it's when he's not posing or anything, he's actually doing something. And that's when I'll use focus tracking. And I got to say, I've never gotten comfortable with this camera compared to the 60D. I'll still get decent shots at times. I just don't feel like I'm grabbing the continuous focus as well as I would with the 60D that I had. And it may be just me, but I just feel that way. I don't feel like I'm tracking it as well. As far as regular focus in landscape, the autofocus there, it doesn't seem to be a whole lot different. But what I can say is the manual focus of this mirrorless camera is fantastic, and the reason it's fantastic is because of the focus peaking. Right. You can turn, when you've turned the focus ring and you set the focus peaking up, it'll tell you exactly what's in focus, and that is fantastic because you can see from the very beginning and the very end of your frame what's there, and it's just easier to work with in landscape with the manual than it is with autofocus anyway. So. Yeah,
that's one of the things that Canon does not have. It does have an amazing dual pixel AF, but having that peaking is just unbelievable. It's zebra, some people call it. You can, everything gets zebra and you can see what's in focus. I mean, some of the high end cameras do, of course, the Sin line, all the C100s, 213, all they have it, but it is definitely a cinema type of thing. And seeing that you use it for your landscape makes sense because now you can literally get that manual focus, dial it into the exact spot that you want it to be, and now you're not reliant on that autofocus either to get it just right. You're going to tell it where to be and not to move. So I think that makes absolutely perfect sense. But my question, I guess, is the images that you're creating with this system compared to the Canon system. How do they stack up? Now, obviously, you're looking at APS-C versus full frame of the Sony, so I'm going to guess it's a little bit better, but how much better? Is it on par? Is it big difference? How are those images? Are you a better photographer, Jim?
and I'll tell you, no. I'm not a better photographer because of the camera. I'd be taking the same pictures with my Canon as I'm taking with the Sony. Here's the difference. And the difference may be as much the full frame as it is the Sony sensor. Okay, I've not shot full frame before, so I don't have anything to compare it to. The dynamic range of this camera is so much better than the 60D that where I may have had to bracket photos before to get the exposure I needed, I hardly ever bracket anything anymore.
Wow.
I'm able to get a generous amount of dynamic range in there to where I can usually bring up what I need to bring up in post very easily, especially if I expose for the highlights. A lot of the shadows they come right in really nice. So from that standpoint, it's fantastic. And like I said, the pictures themselves won't be any different. They're just a little bit easier for me to make than they were with the Canon.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So I guess the bottom line is, are you going to stick with Sony no matter what? Are you thinking about going back to Canon? By the sounds of it, the Sony's doing it for you. It doesn't really make a difference. The camera obviously is not taking the picture, as a lot of people think that's happening. All the pros know the camera don't make the picture. But are you going to end up sticking with Sony, or what you going to do?
Well, here's how I like to explain that. I wasn't looking to go away from the Canon. And had I not won this Sony, I would still be shooting the 60D and I would still be happy with it. Okay. Right. I now have the Sony. I'm able to do everything that I was able to do with the Canon, in some ways much easier. The resolution's better. I have no reason to look at going anywhere else because I'm able to take the pictures that I want. Now, if I happen to win, a Fuji or a Nikon or a Canon, I may consider that. But I have no reason to go anywhere else, so I'm very happy with the camera. It's got its, like you said before, there's sacrifices to be made from one system to another. I think the benefits that I get mainly from going to full frame is a huge benefit. So I don't plan on going anywhere.
So, all right, guys, there is Jimmy Denham. And what I want to do is I'm going to put his Spark, like I said, in this video that I'm creating. So you're going to see some of these images, but I also want you to go and take a look at his work. And I'm going to put down here below a link so you can go see his just amazing landscape work. Also, I'm going to ask that he comes in to answer any of you guys' questions. All right. So if you have any questions for him in the comment area below, put them down there, and I'm sure he'll be absolutely happy to be able to answer those questions for you. I think I'm just absolutely just honored to be able to have him here on the channel and actually give us a real world representation on how 2 years has been with the Sony system, and I really do appreciate it.
Oh, glad to do it. I really appreciate it, Joseph.
So that's it, guys. We are out of here for yet another vlog. I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys.